This content is adapted from Professor Dr. Fahri Işık's book, Civilization Was Born in Anatolia.
All right, let's just jump right in with a pretty bold statement, a thesis that might just flip everything you've learned about the ancient world on its head. It's simple, it's direct, and it's backed by a ton of archaeological work. Western civilization wasn't born in Greece. It was born in Anatolia. So think about it for a second. If I ask you, where does Western civilization begin? What's the very first place that comes to mind? For most of us, the answer is just automatic. It's what the textbooks have been telling us for a couple of centuries now, ancient Greece. We even have a name for it, the Hellenic Miracle. You know, that sudden, brilliant explosion of art, philosophy, and democracy that supposedly just appeared out of nowhere in Athens. But what if that story isn't the whole story? What if the actual evidence, the stuff literally dug out of the ground, paints a completely different picture? Well, the fact is the archaeological record is incredibly clear. And on this point, the textbooks are, to put it bluntly, just wrong. So what's the real story then? Well, you can frame it with a really simple but powerful idea, one that completely reframes the relationship across the Aegean Sea. Basically, it says Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey, was the cultural giver, and Hellas, mainland Greece, was the receiver. And look, this isn't just some random theory. It's the conclusion of archaeologist Fahri Işık. He makes the case that during those critical centuries between 1200 and 500 BC, the flow of new ideas and innovation was almost entirely from east to west. As he puts it, the Anatolian Ionian people were the givers, the Hellas Dorian people were the receivers. To really make this case, we've got to follow the evidence. So let's start with Exhibit A, the story told by stone itself. We're going to look at the very moment the realistic human form was born in art. And we're going to start with something you've probably seen a million times in museums, that famous archaic smile. It's that kind of subtle, peaceful look you see on early statues. But where did it really come from? Now, the old story often points to Athens, but the smile's journey actually starts way earlier, in Anatolia, in Neo-Hittite art. At first, it's just a simple, symbolic upturn of the mouth. But then, around 600 BC, the Ionian artists over in Anatolia did something incredible. They were the first to make it look, well, real. They connected the smile to the eyes, to the cheekbones, creating an expression of actual joy, a look that reflected a carefree and prosperous world. This wasn't just them copying something. It was a total innovation that brought stone to life, and it happened long before it ever became a thing in Athens. The timeline gets even more obvious when we look at the next big leap in art. Around 500 BC, sculptors in the Anatolian city of Miletus created this piece, now called the Miletus torso. Its naturalism, the sense of movement, it's basically the start of the classical period. And then, a full decade later, around 490 BC, the famous Critias boy shows up in Athens with incredibly similar features. The chronology here is just undeniable. Anatolia got there first. Okay, let's move on to our next exhibit, because this isn't just about pretty statues. We're talking about the fundamental blueprints for civilization itself, architecture, philosophy, and even religion. Think about a core feature of any Greek city, the Stoa, right? The big columned walkway. Well, its origin story is the super clear step-by-step journey from east to west. It kicks off in the 8th century BC in the Anatolian kingdom of Urartu as a simple portico, just a part of a temple. Then the idea gets adopted next door in Phrygia. By the 7th century BC, over in Ionia, it evolves into a fully independent building, the Stoa we all know. And only then, in the 6th century BC, hundreds of years after it first appeared, does it finally make its way to mainland Greece. It's like a tangible architectural paper trail of cultural transfer. And what about the brilliant minds that shaped all of Western thought? Well, the father of philosophy, Thales, not from Athens. He was from Miletus in Anatolia. His dad even had a local Carian name. The very first Greek historian, Hecataeus, also from Miletus, and he had a local Anatolian name too. You see, these weren't Hellenic colonists. They were local geniuses. Their whole method of using reason to investigate the natural world was so advanced that when the philosopher Anaxagoras brought these ideas to Athens, they actually prosecuted him for it. While Athens was still wrapped up in mythology, Ionia was literally giving birth to science. You can also see this incredible cultural depth when you look at religion. Over in Anatolia, you find this unbroken religious tradition that goes back thousands of years. I mean, as far back as 7500 BC, a powerful mother goddess was the central figure at Çatalhöyük. She evolves over millennia into the Hittite goddess Kubaba, then the Phrygian mother Cybele, and by 600 BC, she's the focus of these massive Ionian cults, like Artemis of Ephesus. We're talking about a continuous tradition with roots deep in Anatolian soil that predates any Hellenic influence by an absolutely enormous margin. Even the alphabet tells this exact same story. Around the 9th century BC, the Phrygian alphabet was already being used at Gordion, right in central Anatolia, and it's super closely related to the Ionian script that came along later. Widespread use of the alphabet in mainland Greece, that happened later. And get this, when Athens finally decided to standardize its script in 402 BC, which one did they pick? Yep, the Ionian alphabet from Anatolia. So after looking at the evidence in stone, in architecture, in philosophy, and in writing, what's the verdict? I think it's pretty clear. The history that we've all been taught needs a major rewrite. When you lay it all out, the archaeological record shows this just stunning list of Anatolian firsts. The first natural human smile in sculpture, the revolutionary classical form, the architectural stoa, the birth of rational philosophy, the Ionian alphabet that Greece itself adopted, and a continuous religious tradition that goes all the way back to the Neolithic age. Every single one of these foundational pillars of Western culture started in Anatolia before it was ever passed on to Greece. And you know, this isn't some fringe idea. The modern classical scholar Joachim Latatz summed up all this evidence perfectly. He said, "The main city of Europe is not Athens, but Miletus," based on the actual physical evidence. That one sentence just completely flips the traditional narrative on its head. And this really brings us to a final, really compelling thought. All this evidence points to a massive error in our accepted history. And that forces us to ask an even bigger question. If the very foundation of the story of the West is wrong, what else in our understanding of the past do we need to seriously re-examine?
Professor Dr. Fahri Işık, the author of the book Civilization Was Born in Anatolia, is a prominent archaeologist and scholar, particularly known for his research on Western Anatolian civilizations. By challenging the thesis that the Ionian culture, which created Western civilization, originated in Greece, and arguing that the creators of this civilization were the peoples of Anatolia, he enabled the birth of a new school of thought in Anatolian archaeology.